Hello and welcome to the Business Octopus live stream where we talk about all things sales, marketing, and technology. I'm Avon Collis, CRM and Marketing Automation Specialist at Relevate and all-around good guy. Today, I'm going to be talking through some common questions that we get around technology, marketing, and sales. Don't forget that if you have any questions, you can get in touch with us via socials or on our website at relevate.com.au. We also have our YouTube channel and we have the MarTech Discord community. We'll put those links in the chat at the end of this, where you can network with other MarTech professionals, discuss ideas, build your business and or career, etc. So welcome. Today we've got a few discussion points that a lot of people fail at when they're talking about doing any form of digital transformation. You know, everybody gets really hard into the tech, you know, the ones and zeros. So we want to make sure that we are addressing the things that are really going to drive a business forward. And it really only boils down to three things. So three things that that you need to change, fix, and develop in order to dramatically have an impact on your business. And those three things are people, process, and systems. So by aligning all of those, you will be able to create a dramatic change in the business. I mean, you know, everyone's got an app, a widget, a thing that they can do. But one thing we want to do is nail down the details on each of those and give you some examples of how you can improve using those three elements. So they're people, process, and systems. So the first one we're going to address is the role of people in digital transformation. So quite often digital transformation, you know, the first word is digital, which means like websites and CRM and, you know, whatever app that someone is using. But one of the first things we need to address is the people side. You know, what is the training and education level of the people? Do they know how to log into a laptop? And I know that seems a redundant question, but we were talking to someone just the other day who have government employees that normally go out and do stuff physically. You know, for example, a national rail company, most of their people go and, you know, chip away at something at the tracks. They rip up the old ones, they put in new sleepers, and then they weld stuff. So they're generally more of a hands-on kind of role, and they don't really do a lot of, you know, logging in, email management. If now all of a sudden they've got to work from home or they get promoted into a management role and now they need to start doing that stuff, they really don't have the skills and resources behind them to then go and do those sorts of activities. So one of the most important things is probably measuring where your people are at right now. And just also when you're having a look at the big picture is understanding where they need to be. So how much of a digital transformation needs to occur to get them from where they are to where they're going from a people's perspective? And that can require training. So you might need to get some bare basics training. You know, the training sort of assessment or needs analysis really means that you need to see what the base skill level is. So you're not giving a basic bananas how to open an email kind of course to someone who's, you know, actually quite advanced and takes it in their stride every day. But at the same token, you're not going the other way. You're not giving the advanced course to someone who, you know, can barely open up or is using a GSM phone or something that's like really, really old brick technology. So we need to think about where the people are at. And, you know, that's not bad. It's just their focus was different. You know, I know that a lot of the people, like the older workforce, the sort of late millennials, Gen X and Y, I think you would sort of say, they kind of grew up without the tech, but then very early, like in high school, kind of tech became a very important thing. Whereas our younger generation, the Z and whatever it is beyond that, they are pure millennial. They've grown up with tech from day one. The first thing they take to school is their iPad, and they've got a different approach to buying, to doing transactions. But we need to take a snapshot of where the organization is at and meet them where they're at in terms of the technology that you provide. So you can't provide an overly complex solution, maybe not immediately. Maybe you need to have a staging out of the things that people are going to use. There needs to be a culture change. Maybe there's some culture around don't open every email. I know that my in-laws that are 60 now, and they used to send those chain emails all of the time, and they thought they were being inclusive and fun and helpful and thought were sharing. But what they were actually doing is sharing my email address with about 1,000 other people in the forward or the reply all or something like that. So that education around skilling up and whilst it seems to some people it may seem a no-brainer, but the curse of knowledge is when you know it, it seems like nothing. But when you didn't know it, it seemed like a big hurdle to get to that point of knowledge, of understanding. So there's a culture of security. There's a culture of, always checking in on a particular app or always, jumping onto Teams. There's even plenty of TV ads now that make a joke of you're on Zoom, you're on mute and I can't see you and all that sort of stuff. Even now, people should be pretty well beyond that. But I think there's still a lot of tech laggards. And that's not denigrating who they are, but just you need to be aware of where your organization is at and where they need to be. So a lot of organizations will screen for that when they're hiring. However, the incumbent employees, the ones you've had for 10 years, 15 years, maybe they need a bit of skilling up. Maybe their role never involved anything like that, so it didn't really matter to them. So the next thing to think about, look at, consider is the value of process. So I'd like to share a story around process. So, for example, we went into an organization and they were a field service management organization. Basically, they had some like a trade service, and people would call them off Google. They'd run all these Google ads. People would call them. Someone would answer the phone, and then they'd say, "Yep, I would like a quote." And so they'd go, "No worries, we'll pass you through to our dispatcher." The dispatcher then takes the call and finds where the person that needs the quote is, finds the nearest tradie, and then schedules them into the calendar. It may not be that day, maybe the next day, but it takes into consideration, all the other jobs that are happening in that area. Anyway, long story short, they created a bit of a problem for themselves in that bottleneck scheduler, whilst they kind of had this extra skill or they'd had experience doing this one task, they were run off their feet. Calls would get dropped. Some calls would, by the time they didn't get through, they just hung up and rang the next one on Google. And then they just took that next sale, but they still paid for that Google ad. They still paid for that conversion. So when we mapped this process out on the whiteboard, we sort of said, well, you need to resolve the call in the first instance. The first person that picks up that call needs to answer and resolve or like book that quote, schedule that person to go out and look at their issue and then provide a quote. And they went from having 4 people on the front end and 1 person who's flat out scheduling on the back end to needing to skill up and hire 8 people on the front end because they were able to do the first call resolution. So their sales, their calls took longer, but they closed significantly more sales because, the person who answers the phone can then schedule you in. You don't have to wait for on hold for 10 minutes, 20 minutes. You don't have to call back later or be called back later, which sometimes didn't happen because it just got forgotten. And so they were actually, by slowing down, they sped up. And now that business actually got too busy to talk to us because they were so flat out on the back end trying to deal with all of their new sales because they weren't dropping calls. They weren't losing money that they were spending on Google ads. They were able to serve the customer. The customer was happy. They'd had their result, which was their quote booked in. And then from there, whether they won the sale or not was generally up to the next part in the process. But we had a dramatic impact on the organization, and we did not implement one single piece of technology. There was consideration to the value of people. There was consideration to the value of process. And at that point, no tangible value to systems. But if you think about the process, that it was the system of handling that call or that process. So that leads us into our third point, is talking about, again, about the value, or the three areas that you need to focus on for effective digital transformation, being people, process, and systems. So we talked about how if your people can't handle new levels of process, systems, technology, that they may need to skill up. They may need some training. You may need to take them on a journey because they can't break away from their old way of doing things overnight. Then the process, sometimes changing the process may seem slower, may not initially look like it does the right thing, or may not look like it has any valuable impact. However, a change in process can have a dramatic change in the way that things are done in the business. You should never put your original way of doing things into a new system, because you have new capabilities, you have new ways of doing things, you have new tools at your disposal, that like email automation or triggers and new screens and dashboards and reports and analytics. So having a good process. So getting into the value of systems. Information in your business is like an ocean, but you can only hold a little bit in your hands. So if you think about systems and data and information like that, then you know that having something in the middle that everybody can share is really, really important. And having a really good system that allows you to handle more data is almost like having a big bucket to hold that data or information. So if data is like an ocean and you can only hold that much in your hands, then you need to be able to have a system or a bucket or something that can hold a little bit more. Then that will allow you to put that into other people's hands, be able to talk about the same information, categorize it, group it, and allows you to handle more data. The other one is knowledge management. How many times have you had a client, a customer, and then you need to hand that off to someone else? Do you need to spend 30 minutes explaining where you're up to with that client? Maybe if you don't have some systems. But if you do have a system, maybe there's a conversation history. Maybe there's all the contact information that you need. Maybe there's some triggers and some actions and some next steps already written down. So quite often, I walk into organizations and maybe they've got really good sales, they've got really good marketing, but the place that it really falls down is when it gets transitioned from that sales and marketing perspective to operations. Operations, or the people who deliver the product or service, go, what the hell was promised? What are we delivering here? And that time spent trying to figure that out and reverse engineer the things that are missing in that communication can be immense. It's like a hidden time sap in a business. So knowledge management is not just about a policy, a process, a procedure, a how-to guide. It can just be about sharing customer information, sharing where a customer is at in the cycle, what the history is with them, what has happened, all the activities, etc. And so, going back to my previous point about having a huge amount of information that you can only consume, you can only read, you can only look at so many things in a day. When the business gets that big, you really need to rely on data. And, a lot of times people look at the big picture and they don't see the wood for the trees. There's a whole lot of little things going on. There might be 100 calls. There might be 5,000 emails in a day. But no one person can really conceptualize that. And so having data insights is really, really important. Now, a lot of times people think about, all right, I'm going to look at the number of leads or the number of sales or the number of dollars. But the real data that is actionable is the ones that give you a clue about the next step or the next thing. So, for example, how many calls does it take to convert a deal? So then you might change the way you make calls. Maybe you make them more efficient. Maybe you make more of them. How many emails does it take for someone to convert? there might be a metric there where maybe you can condense more into the email or start sending SMS or send something physically. But you won't know that until you look at the data insights. Maybe there's a change in the customer happiness, and that would be evidenced through your CSAT or customer satisfaction score. But if you're not measuring, if you're not taking that data, you're not going to be able to put your finger on the pulse, figure out what's wrong and fix it before it becomes a serious problem. And at a certain scale, it's really hard to see. You can't overwatch and manage every single employee every minute of every day. So you need to have data and insights to be able to bring that information back and help you make decisions at scale. Because when you get to a certain level of business, that's all you have. You do not have visibility on the whole thing. You cannot. And you have to work through data and reports. So having a system that captures every level of interaction, every stage, every click, is something that then lends itself to being reportable. And so the value of systems is also access to that system, access to the information as and when you need it. So having something that's mobile optimized is very, very powerful and almost critical in today. So not only if you're traveling, perfect example, we went on holiday, same time, my business partner, Rana, his family, they had a new arrival the day we were flying out. And so the two of us were pretty much offline, but we were able to manage most things through the phone, and the team were able to pick up heaps of things. And I could answer that question or review that bit of information or respond to something without a great deal of additional effort. And the stats are that sales teams that are mobile optimized close their sales targets 60% of the time, whereas sales teams that are desktop only close their sales targets 40% of the time. So it means they can get out of the office, they can build relationships, they can see data insights in real time, they can get the history of the customer in the car while they're flicking through their phone before they walk into the meeting. And then when they walk in, they can see, oh, Joe likes a long black coffee and he's got a dog named Fred. So that can completely change the way you build rapport. Those sort of data insights can be really, really powerful, but you cannot have a massive change without addressing all of those 3 points. So as we were talking about earlier, the value of people, making sure they have the skills and the capability to handle the systems and the technology, making sure you have a process that's intelligent, that has actually been reviewed, having a process that ends in sign in the purple book, but there's no where, there's no why, there's no who, is pointless. And not taking into consideration the new capabilities that you're going to have. You don't put an old process in a new technology, because now you have new power. You could probably take some steps out or consolidate some things. And then recognizing the value of systems and making sure that those things are built out very effectively. Now, one thing I will say is that if you're going to build a process or if you're going to build a system, is involve everyone in the chain, everyone who's going to need the information. One thing you want to avoid is making a change that saves, for example, the finance person an hour, but then makes the salespeople do 10 hours more, is not effective. You need to strike the right balance and involve different work teams to say, when we make this change, who does it impact? Why? Is this a good fit? Is it a good change? Then you have an intelligent process that helps guide people through, the changing and dealing with that bit of change. Make sure the system is built the way it should be and the process is intelligent. So that's pretty much the 3 main points for today. One thing I did want to share is if you've been listening and you'd like to ask a question, or if you have any thoughts or feedback or something you'd like us to talk about, then you can jump on any of the socials and leave a comment. You can go to relevate.com.au and fill out the contact form. Don't forget, if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe. We are oh so close to reaching a little milestone. And if you are available, if you have any time, don't forget to check out ripperhosting.com.au. We do have a new YouTube video ad which has been launched today. So go to just go to YouTube, search for Ripper Hosting, and then check out our new ad. It's pretty cool. It's got me in it. Tell me what you think. I'd love your feedback. But otherwise, thank you for listening. Please, if you're listening to, if you're on YouTube, you can check out our podcast as well. If you have any questions, don't forget to ask. Otherwise, thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to catching up with you next time. Take care.